everybody! Today we're going to answer the question, why does every business use 10.0.0.0/8? And why should you not use it at home? Short answer is, they use it because it is the biggest private network, and that can simplify a lot of things. And the reason why you should not use it at home is because if you're going to work from home, that's going to screw things up. Want to know why? Stick around and find out. Let's get into it. If you're setting up a normal home network, right, for your laptops, phones, game consoles, whatever, then the default network size for a little network is gonna be just fine. But if you're building out a network for a business, you will almost certainly want a large private network that you can subnet into a lot of smaller ones. I think it's time for Tiny Brad. Tiny Brad! Okay. So previously, we discussed this whole network class thing, right? Class A, B, and C are networks that you can send traffic to or from. And each of those has a private network, RFC 1918 if you're keeping track, that we can use again and again and again in our own personal networks, private, corporate, whatever networks, governmental, but cannot exist directly on the internet. Gotta use NAT between them and the internet. Well, over in IPv4 Class A, that's going to be 10.0.0.0/8 network. Class B was the 172.16.0.0 through 172.31.0.0, and those are /16 networks. And Class C, well, that's the 192.168.0.0 through 192.168.255.0/24 networks. So these different private networks have different sizes as well. Down here in Class C, these /24 networks mean that you've got 24 bits on the network side, and so only 8 bits on the host side, or about 254 usable addresses in each of those networks. Over on these Class B, these /16s, that's 16 bits on the network side, 16 bits over on the host side. And so that's going to leave you 16 networks of about 65,000 addresses. 65,536 minus 2 for each if you were to leave them full size there. And up at Class A, that's 8 bits on the network side and 24 bits over on the host side of that address. And so if you were to leave that at default size, that would give you about 16.7 million addresses in that one network, if you weren't going to subnet it or anything. And so at your house, if you've got some address like 192.168.0.0 for your network, those 254 usable addresses are going to be just fine. But if you were starting out a business and you tried starting out on that 192.168.something over in that /24, well, it's going to suck real bad when you have to re-IP everything because you don't have enough addresses. And so instead, right, you might be looking up, or instead of your Class C, up at that Class B. Well, you could certainly use this Class B, that 172.16 or through 172.31 in corporate, and there's definitely some use cases there. But by the time you get to that, these are defaults of /16s, which are kind of big for most purposes, and so you probably subnet that, split it up into smaller networks anyway. And so you got to get into that work of planning and splitting stuff out once we get up here to these larger networks. But that's only going to get you these 16 networks of 65,000 each, or split them up for some more. And so you got to do all that work, but you could just head up there to Class A, 10.0.0/8, and that could be split up into a whole bunch of networks. And that /8 with 24 bits worth of possible addresses that you could split up, well, that's about 16 times as many addresses as you get down here in Class B. And so this is what it comes down to, like, the straightforward answer. Why do businesses all start with 10 dot whatever for their addresses? Because it's one big private address range. It's easy to just remember, oh, everything starts with a 10 is mine. And you can take that and split it up and just have that extend out for a long time for a whole lot of possible internal addresses. So then, if that's why you're going to do that in the business, why not at home? Well, like we mentioned before, it's going to mess you up if you're trying to work from home. And what it comes down to is that your computer, your work computer or whatever that you bring home, is going to have some software in it that's called VPN software, virtual private network. And the way that works is by installing routes on your computer. Yeah. And those routes are going to specify everything that you need to get access to back at the office. Well, that's available via a virtual NIC, basically a virtual interface that is the VPN. And anything that it sends over there, well, that gets encrypted and sent off to some IP address as some firewall concentrator or VPN concentrator back at the office. Okay, so that's going to work just fine. But, well, in fact, let's do a little drawing. Okay, so I've done a little bit of work here so you don't have to sit around and watch me draw the whole thing. So let's imagine here I am at home with my work laptop, and it's just plugged into my home network. We'll say it's directly wired up to my little home firewall, or wireless, doesn't really matter. That goes out to the internet, whatever that looks like. And then there's also the work firewall or VPN concentrator back at some office or something or another. And then behind that is my desk somewhere behind that, the printer maybe that's down the row, whatever else. Well, over here on my work PC, I'm going to have some address that's my own address on my home network. Maybe it's 192.168.0.100. /24. And I'm going to have some default gateway for my home network that's something like 192.168.0.1 /24 again. Okay. And so for this VPN to work on my computer, there's, like we said a moment ago, some routes that it's going to install on my computer. And your computer already has routes built into it. When you have a default gateway, that's a default route that says, if I don't know about any other network, send it here. To who? To your default gateway, the IP address of your home router. Send it off to everybody else. Okay, but if everything back at work is something like, do a different color here, I'm going to make it purple. Maybe everything back at work is, like we said, 10.0.0/8. It's actually a bunch of networks inside of there. Well, then your VPN software is going to install some routes that say, hey, if you're looking for anything in the 10.0.0/8, send it to send it through the VPN interface, the VPN tunnel, encrypt it, and off to some IP address out on the internet. Likely it's going to be like a DNS lookup so that it doesn't have to be the same IP address every time. But let's go ahead and just say that it's available via some static IP address that's out there on the internet. And I'm just going to be 100% wrong here and say it's 1.0.0.1 is the address to send it to. So something like IP route 10.0.0/8 is available via 1.0.0.1. Would be like a route installed on your computer. And so then presumably that 1.0.0.1 would be an IP address on the company's VPN out there. Okay, and so now if I'm on my work computer here, but at my house, and I just want to ping my default gateway. Well, ping, 192.168.10.1 for maybe, 0.1. Cool, and now I get a messages sent and received. And so if that ping was coming out of my work PC here, then that little message is going to go up the wire. It's going to, inside my computer, say, it's from my IP to 192.168.0.1, and that's the same network as me, so I'll send it from my Mac to them and send it up the wire and it hits them. Okay, if instead I was pinging something back at the office, or sending a print job to the printer that's down the end of the row from my desk out there. Well, maybe that's some message instead from my computer to like, say 10 dot, I don't know, 1.1.100. Okay, and so if that's the IP address I'm trying to get to, 10.1.100, well, it's going to need to go from my computer to there. And the way this is going to work is that my work computer with that VPN is going to have a second IP address. In the VPN software, in addition to having a route, it's also going to have another IP address on like a virtual NIC, essentially. And so maybe I've got an address of, I don't know, 10.255.255.100 slash, and it could be a teeny tiny network. I've seen /32s here, but I'm going to just keep it simple and say /24, and let's not worry about it. Okay, and so this might be my IP address to send stuff from anytime I'm doing the whole VPN thing. And so when I try sending them, the print job or whatever to 10.1.100 that's over here in, it's a printer or something back at work. Well, my work computer with the VPN is going to say, oh, I know where that is. I send it out, from my IP address, but I'm going to wrap it up, sending it out this VPN traffic and have it sourced from this different address inside 10.55.55.100 inside the encrypted message. What? Yeah. And so then that message is going to come out in this like encrypted payload on the inside as being from my 10 dot whatever address to that 10 dot whatever address and get sent up the wire, but as an encrypted message. Whoa, okay. And gets sent out to my default gateway and out to the wider world. And the wider world says, oh, I know where, 1001 is the outside pack of that. And it gets to 1001, and then it splits off the outside and it says, 10.255.255.100 is trying to talk to 10.1.100, and it routes it over there internally back at the corporate network. Okay, this is just what's going on with that VPN. Here's the thing though. If I've got 10 dot something addresses on my home network, I'm going to break this whole thing. Yeah, because if my home network wasn't 192.168 or whatever, instead, if it was 10 dot something, let's just come over here. Let's say it was 10.0.0.1/24. And that my computer was 10.0.0.100/24. Okay, now if I try pinging my default gateway, well, my VPN software is going to say, oh yeah, that's that's all available back at corporate. So you need to tunnel that. And cool, no problem. Then you need to ARP, make sure you send it to the MAC of your default gateway. Let's just ARP for who your default gateway is, 10.0.0.1. Oh, to get to that, it goes through the VPN tunnel and, I'm out of luck, right? Even if I'm just trying to ping my default gateway, I've suddenly broken things because I can't get to it because it's through the VPN tunnel, but I can't get through the VPN tunnel without getting to my default gateway. Yeah. Okay, and so this is why you do not want to have a 10 dot whatever network as your home network. Not if it's just some address you're trying to reach. Not like it's going to break things when you're trying to get to work from home. Okay, flip side, if you're the person that's trying to start setting up that work from home option, those VPN options, don't use 192.168 addresses for devices you expect employees to get to. Why? Because if you do, well, then when they set up their VPN software, in addition to saying, 10.0.0.8 is available back on the VPN concentrator, there can be, of course, multiple routes in there. And so if you set up another one saying that there's an IP route or 192.168.0.0/24 is available back at 1001, well, now when they're trying to get back to their own network, if they happen to have that one, same problem, right? They're likely now going to have problems if they happen to have that as their home network because now they can't get to their default gateway, right? From your perspective, hey, they can't get to that resource you were trying to share out anyway, plus you broke them trying to do anything else at all, right? And so for this exact reason, you don't generally use 192.168 addresses back at corporate, not for addresses you expect all the employees to reach anyway. And you don't, as an individual, want to use 10. Whatever addresses at your house. All right. The purpose of all this is to try and make sense, again, of these different private networks, of when you're going to use them and how and why. Y'all, I am having a blast, and I hope you are too. Keep those comments coming, right? If there's something that you're thinking of that you would like me to bring up, or something that you're wondering about that maybe doesn't sound right, just say something, right? Share your stories. If you like what you're seeing, hit that like. You want to see more, hit subscribe. I'll see you next time.
Hey, mister, you want to buy a network? I get you a real good deal on a 10.0.0.0/8. But that's a private network. You don't buy those. You're gonna have so much space at your house with all those IPs. Look. Also, you shouldn't use 10.0.0.0/8 at your house, especially if you work from home. The more you know. Ooh, I didn't know they were still doing those.